Essential updates and insightful tips on rethinking taxation for Tanzania's growth. Let's go through it together. Tanzania is entering a decisive chapter in the second half of the sixth phase government. The choices made now will shape the country's economic direction for years. At the center of this moment is one question. What kind of tax system do we want for a modern Tanzania? Taxation is more than a revenue mechanism. It is the foundation that supports economic growth, social cohesion, and long-term national progress. If Tanzania is to fully unlock its potential, the tax system must be rebuilt with clarity, fairness, and efficiency at its core. Reform as a shared national duty. Transforming the tax system is not a task that government institutions can carry alone. A fair and modern tax regime depends on active participation from every part of society. The Tanzania Revenue Authority must improve administration and communication, but businesses must also embrace proper record-keeping and honest reporting. Tax professionals have a duty to guide clients responsibly, not only to win disputes. Civil society must help educate communities and promote accountability. Ordinary citizens, whether operating a shop, a farm, or a digital enterprise, contribute by complying and demanding fairness. When all these groups pull in the same direction, taxation becomes a tool for national progress rather than a weight on a small number of compliant taxpayers. Shared responsibility ensures that the benefits and obligations of the tax system are distributed fairly. It builds mutual trust, improves voluntary compliance, and strengthens the social contract between the state and the people. In that spirit, tax reform becomes a collective national project aimed at shared prosperity, not an isolated government initiative. A modern economy cannot rely on an outdated tax structure. Tanzania's economic landscape has shifted. More people work in informal businesses. Digital services are expanding, and new industries are emerging. For the tax system to keep pace, the country must deliberately widen its tax base. This starts with formalizing parts of the informal sector, not through force, but by creating simple, low-cost processes that make registration and compliance easy. When more businesses operate formally, the tax burden is shared more widely and fairly. It also means embracing digital solutions that simplify how taxpayers register, file, pay, and issue receipts. Digital tools reduce the cost of compliance and help TRA track economic activity more accurately. In addition, Tanzania must recognize and support new and growing industries, from technology to creative sectors to digital commerce. These areas contribute real value to the economy and should be integrated into the tax system in a way that supports growth, not stifles it. A broader tax base does three things. It distributes obligations more fairly, it stabilizes government revenue, and it reduces pressure on the already compliant taxpayers who currently carry most of the load. A tax system should grow with the economy, not weigh it down. Broadening and modernizing the base is how Tanzania builds a tax regime that fuels development rather than slowing it. A tax system gains legitimacy when people believe the assessments are fair, predictable, and rooted in facts rather than assumptions. This requires TRA to strengthen its internal capacity so that every assessment reflects professionalism and accuracy. First, technology must play a central role. Modern digital tools allow TRA to analyze data more reliably, detect inconsistencies early, and base assessments on real transactions instead of estimates or outdated information. When systems are automated and data-driven, the risk of human error or personal bias reduces significantly. Second, ethical training for officers is essential. A strong tax system depends on officers who understand the law, uphold integrity, and follow procedures consistently. Continuous professional development, both in technical skills and ethical standards, helps ensure that assessments respect taxpayers' rights and follow established rules. Third, decisions must be consistent. Similar cases should produce similar outcomes. When taxpayers can predict how TRA will apply the law, they feel more secure and are more likely to comply voluntarily. Consistency also reduces the perception of unfair treatment, which is one of the main triggers of disputes. When assessments are transparent, logical, and supported by clear evidence, taxpayers develop trust in the system. This trust is what ultimately drives voluntary compliance, reduces conflict, and strengthens the relationship between TRA and the business community. A fair assessment process is not just an administrative issue, it is the backbone of a credible and modern tax regime. EFD machines have supported compliance for years, but many SMEs still struggle with their price, maintenance, and reliability. Tanzania needs more practical, low-cost alternatives that work for businesses of all sizes, especially small traders. Mobile-based receipting offers the most practical and affordable way for Tanzania to modernize compliance. Instead of relying on expensive hardware, the country can adopt tools that work directly from ordinary phones. These include mobile applications that generate electronic fiscal receipts instantly, USSD services that allow traders with basic phones to issue receipts without internet, cloud-based invoicing platforms that store transaction data securely, and portable low-cost EFD alternatives for businesses that still need a device. Countries that shifted from traditional hardware to these digital phone-driven systems have seen a sharp rise in compliance while reducing operational costs. Tanzania can achieve similar results by embracing the same approach. Digital receipting also transforms record-keeping for businesses. Every transaction is stored automatically, creating clean and reliable data that can be used during audits, when applying for loans, or when preparing financial statements. This simplicity strengthens trust between TRA and taxpayers because the system feels fair, affordable, and predictable. When the tools are simple, compliance becomes natural, not a struggle. Tanzania's current tax dispute framework is heavily adversarial. When disagreements arise, most cases move almost immediately to the Tax Revenue Appeals Board or the tribunal up to the Court of Appeal. These are important institutions, but litigation itself is slow, costly, and often deepens tension between taxpayers and the TRA. Instead of resolving issues efficiently, the process can drag on for months, sometimes years, consuming time, money, and trust on both sides. If mediation is conducted under the Tax Ombudsman Service Tanzania, TOST, it will provide a more practical and human-centered alternative to formal litigation. Instead of escalating issues through adversarial processes, mediation encourages early dialogue. It brings both parties to the same table to clarify facts, correct procedural or documentation errors, and understand each other's perspectives before the matter grows into a costly and prolonged legal dispute. TOST functions as an independent and neutral space. This independence gives taxpayers confidence that they will be heard fairly, and it helps TRA engage with disputes without the pressure of litigation. By encouraging open communication, TOST helps resolve matters quickly, cheaply, and with far less hostility. The goal is not to win a case, but to find a fair, timely, and mutually acceptable solution. This approach saves resources, builds trust, and strengthens voluntary compliance. It transforms dispute resolution from a battle into a problem-solving exercise, something the tax system urgently needs. Mediation under TOST is being considered as an important reform that could significantly strengthen Tanzania's tax dispute resolution system. If adopted, it would allow disputes to be addressed at an early stage, before positions harden or evidence becomes difficult to manage. This early engagement would speed up resolution and reduce unnecessary escalation. It would also ease the workload of the Tax Revenue Appeals Board and the tribunal, enabling them to focus on matters that genuinely require judicial interpretation. For both taxpayers and the government, introducing mediation would lower the cost of resolving disputes by reducing the need for lengthy hearings, repeated submissions, and procedural delays. A process that allows taxpayers to be heard and treated fairly is more likely to encourage voluntary compliance, reduce hostility, and promote practical, solution-oriented dialogue. Over time, this reform would help build trust, predictability, and transparency in tax administration, strengthening the relationship between TRA and taxpayers. The nation awaits the final report of the Presidential Tax Reform Commission with high expectations, and once it is submitted, the government must respond with timely and decisive action. The commissioners experienced, well-informed, and deeply familiar with Tanzania's tax environment have spent months diagnosing weaknesses and developing practical reforms that can modernize the entire tax ecosystem. Their work offers the country a real chance to correct long-standing structural gaps and build a tax system that supports growth, fairness, and efficiency. The credibility of the reform process will depend on how quickly the government adopts the key recommendations, how clearly it sets out implementation timelines, how openly it communicates with stakeholders, and how consistently it demonstrates commitment to modernizing the system. Fast and deliberate action will restore trust, strengthen the investment climate, and place Tanzania firmly on the path toward a modern tax regime that drives economic development. However, reforms alone are not enough. Taxpayers comply more willingly when they believe their contributions are used responsibly. Transparent public spending, directed toward infrastructure, education, healthcare, and community services, builds confidence and reinforces the social contract. When citizens can see tangible improvements funded by their taxes, compliance becomes a shared responsibility rather than a burden imposed from above. Sustainable compliance also requires a shift in the relationship between taxpayers and the TRA. Voluntary compliance thrives when people feel respected, informed, and supported. Strong taxpayer education, simplified procedures, and digital TRA services can move Tanzania from a system driven by coercion to one built on cooperation. This type of environment strengthens long-term stability and builds a national culture where taxation is understood as part of collective progress rather than an adversarial process. A modern tax system must be simple, fair, efficient, and predictable. Tanzania's future depends on policies that support investment, encourage productivity, and uplift communities. By modernizing digital receipting, strengthening assessments, widening the tax base, enhancing transparency, embedding TOST-led mediation, and swiftly implementing the Tax Reform Commission's recommendations, Tanzania can build a tax regime that truly powers national development. The sixth phase government has a historic chance to reset the country's approach to taxation. With the right reforms, Tanzania can create a system that supports businesses, drives economic transformation, and secures shared prosperity for generations. This article is authored by Respicious Mujag, advocate and tax consultant, SARK Law Chambers. To learn more, visit www.sarklawchambers.co.z or visit our office at City Mall, 1st floor, F27A, BBTD, Morogoro Road, Dar es Salaam. For any inquiries, contact us at +255-754-302-054, site +255-714-217-200 or email info@sarklawchambers.co.ts or remwijayahoo.com.